We're all saddened and shocked when we heard that Big Brother icon Nikki Graham had passed away due to complications associated with her eating disorder. According to the Eating Disorders Association, BodyWhys, this pandemic has been very challenging for people with eating disorders. Support and understanding is needed now more than ever. Joining me now to share her story with us is broadcast journalist and former Goggleboxer, Sheila Naughton. Sheila, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me and for having this conversation.
Well, before we even start, I want to ask you how you're feeling because you've been sharing your story a lot. And while it's been helping so many of us out there, what impact does this have on you?
I suppose something that a lot of people don't consider when they think of eating disorders is that it doesn't only tell you things about food or exercise or weight or image. Often it will tell you that what you have to say or what you contribute to society is worthless and pointless. And and oftentimes it'll be like nobody wants to hear you. And like nobody cares what you're saying, and you're actually. So while I tell my story and I just so don't want anybody to end up in the position that I did, I constantly have self-doubt. And it's not self-doubt looking for attention of no, Sheila, you're amazing. It's not that, because often I won't even vocalize it. But often it's just it's very hard to continue to tell your story and believe that people want to hear or care, and that you're not being boring and monotonous. But then there's also times, obviously, as well, where it can be slightly emotionally draining, where I am terrified of relapsing, because imagine if I relapsed and I was, promoting online that I was doing well, or something like this. I have these thoughts. Now, I feel very safe and I don't think that's a risk, but I do have these thoughts every now and again.
How do you deal with those thoughts?
I actually have to remind myself, and I suppose it's kind of like mantras, which I know a lot of people will maybe think are a bit nonsense, but I do have to say to myself, no, what you have to say is worthwhile. And I have to say it over and over to myself and say, what you have to offer someone is worthwhile. And you also, to remind myself that I do have a lot to offer, because I really sometimes feel like I don't. And say, when I was at the depths of my illness, I just stopped going places because I thought, I have nothing to offer a conversation. I have nothing to offer my friends. I'm not supportive. You've so many negative thoughts that are outside the world of eating and body, that, you really have to develop a way of talking to yourself that's much kinder. And sometimes it's very forced, but it'll get me through that moment, and it'll make me post that thing on Instagram, or make me say, okay, no, do that interview, because it might help one person. And isn't that worthwhile?
Well, it's very worthwhile. So I thank you for what you're doing. Um, when you see something or when you hear the news of Nikki Graham passing, it's sad for all of us. But for you, what impact does that have on you?
I think, firstly, I don't think I was surprised, which a lot of people were like, we were shocked, and we were, this. I wasn't shocked, because we know that this has the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. We know that. The shocking thing is that it's not being addressed properly. But it really upset me more so that, okay, so if I'm very honest, there's a part of you, the eating disorder part of you, is very, very manipulative and says, she was sick enough. That's what's sick enough. So it starts to tell you, well, maybe you're a failure at your eating disorder, because you never got like that. So, like, you're living your life and you're okay. So there's a very strange triggering side of seeing a death like this that makes you think, well, maybe this is what I should do. And it's the same as when you see these things online with people posting before and after pictures when they were sick. That can trigger you as well to say, well, maybe I need to look like that. But then there's the part of me that's just so sad that we had to lose someone when the help is there, we just can't access it. And I also was a fan, which when I was in sixth class, which now actually is something always to be very, very aware of. I was obsessed with celebrities who were thin, and her and Mary Kate Olsen is another one. Like, totally obsessed with them, and I knew they had anorexia, and I was aware of the word that was associated with it, and I was totally obsessed with them. So I had a fascination with being slim, and I wanted my confirmation name to be Nikki, and my mother had to talk me out of it
Are
and
you
told me it wasn't.
serious?
Yes, she was like, okay, you have to change that. I was like, oh, but I really wanted to be Nikki, and that was because of her. So this is someone that I admired, and so it felt like, it sounds so weird, it felt like I knew her.
Yeah.
And it just, it's very, very hard to accept, but it also, it's not shocking.
So who do you turn to in those situations when, you see, you read about this death, it can be triggering, there's stuff going on in your mind. Who do you reach out to?
So there's actually, if you're on social media in the right way, so if you're following the right types of pages that help you, there's actually a very good eating disorder community online. Now I'm very careful with who I follow online, because if somebody's in very early recovery, that's not really that helpful to me. That's not to say that their journey isn't valid, it just doesn't really help me. But there's some people who are at my stage, and I might talk to them and say, how did you feel about it? And hearing their thoughts and hearing how they are kind of processing it can actually sometimes help you. And seeing other people post about it, and you feel like you're part of something. It's saying this has rocked the community, and you do feel like, okay, so we're all feeling this. So that's a nice place to go. If I'm going to go closer to home, I would always, like, I've always been open with my family, always, about where I'm at and how I'm feeling. Now, because I'm away from home at the minute, I actually didn't talk to them about this, but I do have friends as well who, funnily enough, remembered my little Nikki phase and wanting the name, and did contact me. So I have an awful lot of people around me, because I'm really open, that will ask me or will talk to me about it. And even, just check in. And because they know, they at this stage, that things like that can be triggering. And so I know I'm very lucky, and not everybody is as open as I've been, and aren't able to be. But because I'm open, it's easy for me to have friends and family that'll help.
Were you always that open? Because when it comes to eating disorders, there is a secrecy that comes with it. You don't want people to know that your relationship with food and how you see your body has completely changed.
No, so obviously I wasn't, and I became the best liar in the world. Like, and I'm not a liar. I'm actually was a very bad liar, but suddenly I was a master, and I was so manipulative of situations, of how I dealt with things. But I didn't really know that that's what I was doing, because for a long time I didn't know I was unwell. And I was in total denial, and that went from when I put in quotation marks, looked fine, but also when I didn't look fine. All of that time I didn't know I was unwell. So I would be secretive, or I would make up lies about why I was behaving in a certain way, or why I couldn't attend a certain event. I used to have this compulsion that I had to go to the gym, or I had to do this. And if somebody wanted to interfere with that, I would come up with a lie that they could not talk me out of. So I was always an imperative that I had to do something. So I was it was more that I was a liar rather than secretive. Um, but then it did become secretive as well at certain points where, I would be hiding certain things. But the saddest part was when I wasn't secretive, when I would blatantly do things. And I don't ever tell anyone my behaviors, because I wouldn't like to give ideas, but I would do behaviors very publicly. I would leave things out that I was going to engage in, and my family just had to watch me. And that's even worse. Like, they would say, I can't believe that we can't stop this. But I used to say, you can throw that out, or you can move that, or you can try and stop me. And when you're not here, I'm going to do it anyway. So that's how strong it was. So the secrecy was at the start when I didn't know I was unwell. And then suddenly the eating disorder was so powerful. I did not care if you knew. I was going to do it anyway. And that's terrifying.
It really is. Hindsight is amazing. Like, when you're going through it, as you said, you don't know you're going through it. But when you look back now, is there a moment that you go, that was the moment that my relationship with food and myself changed?
I often described it as like a light switch, but that was when it got really bad. So in 2017 was when I got diagnosed, and I would have said that it was 3 months before that I got unwell. And I always I told the consultants that, and they were shocked. They were like, 3 months? My God, you're better in no time. Because I did feel like it was somebody just switched something in my brain, and I thought, that's it. I'm not, I'm not going to eat anymore. I'm not going to do all these
How
things.
old were you? How old roughly were you when this happened?
When that happened, I was just out of college, so I was 22.
Wow.
But when I look back, when I actually started to do these things, so when the relationship actually changed was I stood in a scale for the first time when I was 7 years old. And I remember the numbers to this day. I remember the numbers. But again, that's hindsight, didn't know. Went through my life then, 11 years of age. My mother remembers me pulling at myself in the mirror, trying to make myself look small and trying to suck in and do all these weird things. I was always body checking my tummy from when I was a child. And then I went to secondary school and I was really badly bullied. But again, I didn't know I was being bullied. And I put on the big mask of I'm fine, everything's fine. And the way I was bullied was unusual because it wasn't being told I was fat, it was being told I was muscly. And that because I had muscle in my legs, I was a man. And I remember just thinking, and I stopped wearing skirts to school. I stopped, wouldn't wear dresses, nothing. But again, didn't register that this was affecting me, and instead just thought, well, if I could get rid of this muscle, wouldn't that solve all my problems? And then finally, when I went into 5th year, I went on a diet. And I suppose that it's from that moment that my relationship with food changed kind of and only got worse. But I was engaging in behaviors before that. And I slipped out of being very strict with myself and being on diets, but I was never off a diet from the age of about 16.
But then your behavior is sort of validated when society keeps saying to you, oh my God, Sheila, look at you. You have lost so much weight. You are looking amazing. Now that has to, like, in your mind, you have to be going, go girl, you're doing the right thing.
Oh, that's the exact line. And that's what Janine says. That's what the eating disorder says. You keep going. You are doing amazing. And you have everyone telling you, God, you must be in the gym the whole time. And you're going, yeah, I am. Little do you know that it's obsessive, but you don't say that bit. So instead you go, yeah. And you think, God, they think I'm great being in the gym all the time. Maybe I should do more. And then they say, oh, well, you really, look at you in that dress. God, that really suits you. And you kind of go, yeah. And it encourages you. And we think it's okay to comment on people when they're losing weight, but little do we know the damage that we're doing. But it did become a point, and I'll never forget, I went home to my dad after a night out and I said, the comments have changed. We kind of had an inkling at this stage, like I knew my relationship was poor with food. My family were kind of mentioning to me, okay, you could stop with the weight loss now, you're okay there now. And I went home and I said, I didn't get a compliment tonight, I got a, where have you gone? And it was a lad said it to me in a nightclub. He goes, God, where have you gone? And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, sure, you're wasted away. And I thought, oh, that's not a compliment. It was a very different moment for me where it suddenly switched. And while some people were complimenting me, others were going, Jeannie, you've got no bum anymore. You've got no this anymore. And I kind of noticed there was a shift then.
But I suppose we need to have a shift in our behavior as well. The fact that we're like, it's one thing to be concerned about somebody, but the constant comments about a person's body, and it's not just women anymore, it's men as well. The constant comments about whether you're looking good, not looking so good, maybe keep those to yourself because you don't know what someone's going through.
Oh, I always say to people, I said that when we go home now, we've been in lockdown for months. People won't have seen each other. How many times are people going to arrive home and be told, geez, you had a good lockdown, did you? Because you spend the entire time eating. Or you'll get the, oh my God, you must have spent the entire time working out. You look amazing. Why can't we say, I'm so happy to see you. I missed having you around. Because
let's try that. Yes. Let's try that. One thing I want to know is you actually mentioned her name there. You called your eating disorder Janine. Why did you give it a name, and what does that do for you?
Yeah, so this was something, and I always say this, it was controversial, to be honest. A lot of people told me I shouldn't have done it. Some of the professionals told me I shouldn't have done it. And then other people thought, oh, it's a great idea. And they decided to do it themselves. Heard other people just call it things like the monkey or the Ed or Anna or whatever. But I was in hospital. I had 2 admissions in hospital. I was in St. Pat's, and during my first admission, I remember talking to my sister when she came to visit me one day, and I was like, "This isn't me." I was like, "It really isn't." I was nasty. I was grumpy. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. My personality was totally gone. Like, I was a totally different person, and I was a person I didn't really like, but at the same time didn't want to stop being. And I thought, this isn't me, and we need to think of someone who this is. So we put out a few names or whatever, but we didn't know any Janines. And I always say, I'm sure there's lovely ones, but we didn't know any, so it was a safe name. And to me, it sounded like a noise. And I was like, right, I'm going to name it. So then when I'm discussing it, I can say, no, Janine doesn't need to eat this or doesn't want me to have this. Sheila does, because Sheila wants to get better. So I used to say to someone, if I freaked or flipped, I'd be like, I am sorry that I did that. It was that little voice that made me do that. And it helped me just kind of separate the two. And it even, I found, helps when I'm in counselling sessions and stuff. Often I've found someone who really works for me. My counsellor, she's amazing. I've had her since the start now. And she'll often say, who's talking to me now? And I have to stop myself and say, who is? Is it Sheila or is it the voice? And it just helps me.
You mentioned there going in for treatment. How did you get to that point? And was it your family that suggested it, or was it you that went, I'm ready to go? And I suppose the thing I want to know as well is, how do you deal with the fact that people are coming up to you saying you need treatment when maybe you're not ready?
That's a really, really good question and a really good point, because like, I wasn't ready the first time and I thought I was. And my parents did an intervention. So they came to my house in Dublin. They saw a photo of me and they freaked, and they arrived at my door and they said, we're taking you home. And they kind of took the control out of my hands at that point. I had been secretly, kind of subtly asking for help by saying things like, oh, I don't really feel well, and I might have to call in sick to work. Is that okay? And eventually, but I wouldn't say it. And then they brought me home and they booked my doctor's appointments and did all my booking of appointments. Even though I said I'd do it, I kept not doing it. I got the referral, I ignored the letter. So eventually it had to be taken out of my hands and it had to be done, but I did want them to do it, which is really hard, and it's a really conflicting thing. And then I remember the day I went in for a consultation and my assessment, and being given the actual words, like the diagnosis is, that was the first time I cried in, I think, months. I realized, oh, this is real. And they said, you're going to have to come in. And I thought, wait, what? I was like, no, I'm not that sick. Like, I don't need to go in anywhere. I could do it from home. And then it happened to be that a bed came free quicker than they thought. And within 2 days, they were ringing me to say to come in. And I went in and thought, oh, okay, fine, I'll go in and make me better. So I didn't, as you said, I wasn't ready, but I thought this was going to be the magic cure, 6 weeks out, going to be better. And it was really hard then when I got in there and realized, like, I had to be ready to do it, and I wasn't. And things got worse and worse. I wouldn't engage with the program. I wouldn't do anything. My compliance was really low. And eventually they said, we're discharging you. And I was shocked, and my parents were shocked. And they said, look, you're not ready. And my parents said, no, she is ready. And I said, I am. But they said, no, she hasn't hit rock bottom. And so you asked about a moment earlier when I realized I was, had a bad relationship with food. I'll never forget the moment I realized I needed to go. The first time I was kind of forced in, and the second time it was the day after Christmas, Stephen's Day. We went to the sales. I was meant to go to my day patient program. I lied and skipped it and pretended it wasn't on. I went into town. They rang my parents, which they shouldn't have done because I'm an adult, but it was a blessing in disguise.
Thank goodness they did.
Yeah, and I was in a changing room trying something on, and at this stage nothing that I wanted to wear ever fit. And I looked in the mirror and was like, I wasn't even the size, it was nothing like that. It was, I actually don't recognize that person. I did not know who it was. I really didn't. And I just, I thought I was going to be sick. I'll never forget standing there and I came out to my mom and I said, I need to sit down. And she was like, are you okay? And I was like, I just need to sit down. And I went and I sat in a coffee shop till they finished their shopping, and I said, I think I do need to go back in. I think they're right. And so that time I decided, I went back in and I said to myself, right, I'm going to surrender to win, which was my phrase that I kept with me. It was so hard. But this time I went in and I thought, I know what I have to do this time. I know what they're going to ask of me. And if I don't at least give it a go for a little while, I'm going to be stuck like this forever. But that's what it felt like. So the second time I went in, it wasn't easy and it didn't cure me. And I'm still on the road, but the second time was me going in.
So then how do you feel when you leave? As you said, it's not like a magic wand where they go, here's a 6-week program, you're done, you're cured, go out there and live your life. When you do leave the security of that treatment center and you have to go back out into the real world, how are you feeling? And then you're coming in, you know, into a pandemic as well. Like, as I said, BodyWhys were saying that, you know, it's bad enough having to live with an eating disorder, but during a pandemic where everything has changed, how does it affect you? How do you feel?
So when I came out, and I was terrified, because you're in a bubble and everyone protects you, and even if you don't like what they're asking you to do, you actually do become institutionalized quite fast. And I behaved in ways that a 10-year-old would behave, always asking permission, always asking my parents to make my decisions for me. I totally reverted back to being a child. I would say, should I go to this thing? Do you want me to come? And they'd say, well, what do you want to do? You're 23. And I don't know. So I didn't know anything. I suddenly stopped making decisions myself, and I had to do a course to learn how to train myself to make my own decisions again. So you're very protected. I think that's something that you probably need to be equipped with a little bit more when you do get discharged from inpatient care, is to learn how to live again in real life. And especially if people are there longer than I was. I was there 10 weeks that time and 5 weeks the week before, or the time before. But there was a long while where things didn't really get better. They stayed exactly the same way as they were. I wasn't, making, say, the weight gain that I was supposed to make. I was just coasting along, and I thought, can't believe this is recovery. I was actually shocked, but it wasn't recovery. And eventually then I remember there was talk about me, a third admission, and I just thought, I can't do it again. I was like, I really can't face it again. So I knew then that I really had to push myself. So I did a program called Radical Openness, which was great. And then that was 6 months, and that really changed my life, because that has really changed my mindset of how I deal with things. It was about how, if you were a very controlled person, how to let yourself be less controlled. And I was with 12 people who all had different diagnoses, so it was a really positive place to be. And then I came out from that, and I started to, I was told, don't make any big decisions now in the next 2 years, focus on recovery. But sure, of course, then I went to start trying to get a job. But it was the best thing I ever did, because suddenly I had a motivation to be well. And it's really work and finding out that I had this life, and suddenly then the weight gain came, and I kind of forgot about it or didn't notice. I won't say I didn't notice. I had freakouts and I had blips.
How do you deal with that? Because you're so focused on the numbers and on the sizes of clothes and stuff. And it is good to be putting on the weight. It's healthy. But in your head, I'm sure there's still a part of you that understands it, but it's still a part that goes, what's going on?
Yeah, I felt like a failure for a long time. I thought, you're failing at an eating disorder. And that sounds so wrong, but it is it. And I would come out and say, yeah, it's good news, in the car. And they'd say, are you not happy? And I'd be like, no. but anybody who says, yeah, I'm delighted that's gone up today now, they're like, it's not true.
Yeah.
But you learn to live with it. I'd say to them, no, I'm not happy, but I'm going to come to terms with it over the next 2 weeks. And then when I have to go again, I'll be okay with this weight when I go back in again. And it was the clothes, really, that was the big thing for me. It was suddenly having to throw them out and fitting into things that you used to fit into, which again, I wanted to be wearing, but part of you was saying, oh God, you're out of control. So it's not so much the weight or anything like that. It's you're out of control, that you can't stop this from happening. But actually submitting to it was what I needed to do. And over time I have gotten better at dealing with it, but I would be lying to say that I like how I look or feel confident. I don't. And I come across very confident, and anyone who meets me would say I am. But if they were to comment on my appearance or how I looked, my confidence would plummet.
But that's a work in progress for you, isn't it? Just getting, yeah. Go
it's
on.
it's learning to deal. I always say I don't have to love how I look. For me, I have to be okay with it. I'm not 100% okay with it yet, but I don't have the urge now to torture myself to be a different way. So I suppose that's something I couldn't have said 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Definitely not. Couldn't have, and I also wouldn't have survived the pandemic 3 years ago. I wouldn't. I would have gone totally back and been probably worse than ever. So I can totally understand why there's such high figures at the moment. I had a few blips. We have sadly lost a family member during COVID, and that sent me into a little bit of a backward cycle. But I'm in a place now where I seem to be able to bounce back, which is amazing.
Yeah. I'm sorry for your loss. That's hard at the best of times, but especially now during this pandemic. For anyone listening who isn't going through this, but has a family member, a really good friend, a loved one who is going through this, what advice would you have for them? Because it is so scary. I mean, this can be life-threatening. So, our instinct is to go get this person, bring them to the doctor and say, go and help them. So, like, you need to tread lightly, but at the same time be firm. What would you suggest?
So I suppose the first thing is to be willing to have an open conversation about it, be willing to put a name to it, say, I think you have an eating disorder. Like, it's the same way as asking someone straight out, do you feel suicidal? Ask the question and don't shy away from it, because the more we tiptoe around it, the more secretive you become, or the more likely you are to deny that there's a problem. So name it, label it. And then sometimes you have to take the control out of their hands a little bit, but you also have to remember, like, if it's someone like me, they're an adult as well.
Yeah.
But the most important thing I would say, and I think my parents would say this too, is the realization they had to come to was they were told, if she wants to die, you can't stop her. And that's an awful but really true fact. You can't stop the person. It's the same as the alcoholic. You can't stop them drinking. What you can do is, though, you can be there for them unconditionally when they're screaming, shouting at you because they're hangry, or when they or refusing treatment. Stick by them, because if they know the support is there and they can see that there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, and that there is a life to get back to, then they will never forget what you've done to support them. But you also have to be kind to yourself and know that you can take a step back from that person, because it's really hard to deal with us. Like, we're really not that nice. When we're sick, we really can be nasty. It's okay to leave the room. It's okay to sit somewhere else. It's okay not to, when they're having a little moment, engage with it at times. So taking a break from it, but also knowing you can't make them better. But at the same time, I know I say all that, you still might have to organise the eldest doctor's appointment. And my dad drove me everywhere. He was like, no, you're not getting public transport. If all I can do is drive you to your appointments, that's what I'll do. And I'll never forget that, because he was supportive in the way that he could be.
Yeah. I know you've had some dark days, Sheila, but it's so good to see they're brighter right now. What's the future looking like for you? What are you hoping for?
Recovery wise, I would love to stop eating on a clock. So as in, I'm looking at the clock now and I'm going, right, 10 minutes time, you have to have your food. I would love to get to a point one day where I'm not eating on the clock, and a friend says to me, do you want to head out today for something? I don't have to say, yeah, but I have to be back by 3. That would be nice. A little bit more freedom. At the moment, it's what is getting me through lockdown, but I would love a little bit more of a free life. I would love to be able to eat in a restaurant, kind of without stress, things like that. They're all little goals. I mean, they don't have to happen immediately, but I'm sure they'll come. So that's recovery wise. Other than that, I just hope that by me talking, and I suppose for a while I was the girl with the eating disorder, but now it's just, if I can stop somebody ending up in hospital, or somebody, just getting somebody to acknowledge that maybe if they tackle it early, it'll really improve their life and their chance to recovery, then I just want to keep doing that. And yeah, I love my work, and I've got a lovely little cat here who's been making noise through this entire interview. So it's just to, hang out with her a bit.
Well, do you know what? Here's to all of that. Sheila, thank you so much for taking the time out and for giving so much of you.
Oh no, thank you. And it's so great that people and presenters and radio stations are not shying away from covering it, and are saying, yeah, let's get you on and give you a platform. And and hear the gritty details. It's we appreciate it. I in the community, I can't speak for everyone, but I would imagine we do.
Well, if anyone's listening or watching this right now, remember, wherever you're listening or watching, there are so many amazing organizations out there that are willing to help. As Sheila said, you can reach out to people on social media, but, you know, reach out to, here in Ireland, BodyWhys are fantastic. We will put up all the details on our website after this interview. Sheila, thanks a million.
Thank you.